Welcome back to season 4 of What the Fertility. This morning we have the absolute pleasure to connect with Leyla, Chief Clinical Officer and co-founder of Dandi Fertility. Dandi provides purpose-built egg freezing and IVF products, virtual and at-home injection services in all 50 states, and personalized fertility consultations. Welcome, Leyla. We are so excited to chat with you this morning and hear about
Hi.
hear about Dandi, but really probably more so how your own infertility journey led you to Dandi. And I know you work in this field as a nurse as well. So
Yep.
yeah, tell all. Where did it kind of start for you?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I have been a nurse for 15 or 16 years now. I started out my career in pediatrics. So I was working in hospital at Columbia Children's Hospital in New York City. I was on the pediatric hematology and oncology floor, which is just like the saddest, but also like most
Potentially rewarding.
very rewarding, very eye-opening, gives you a lot of perspective. Yeah, it was equal parts good and bad. And then I transitioned to just like general well peds, and I managed a pediatrician's office for quite some time. So anywhere from newborns through when they would leave us at like 21, 22. So like the whole kind of like adolescent life cycle as well. And then I switched to fertility. It kind of just like fell into my lap. I interviewed for a recovery room position just because I wanted to learn a new skill set. I loved peds, but it became really monotonous, and it was just like the same vaccine schedule, strep, fevers, and I wasn't really learning anything anymore. So I wanted to get like a new skill set, and they were like, "Oh, well, would you consider being an IVF nurse?" I was like, "I don't even know what IVF is, but sure." And so that's kind of how fertility fell into my lap. So it's kind of like I do all of it. So making the babies, the newborns I know really well, kids I know really well, adolescents, like I know the kind of the whole life cycle from pre-conception through pregnancy and then through our patients usually left us by like 21, 22 when they would go to college. Um but fertility wasn't really like I didn't know anything. I didn't even know anything about my own menstrual cycle, to be honest with you. Like I always thought that my period was the end of the cycle. Like the when you
Yeah.
bleed, like that's the end of your cycle. That's actually the beginning of your cycle. That's how little I knew when I started working in the space. But right off the bat, I'm a quick learner to begin with, but within 2 months of being there, I was on the floor already. And I used to always tell my husband I wish I had a talent like singing or, playing an instrument or whatever. And I realized that my talent is connecting with people. And I feel like in the fertility space, especially because it's such an intimate medical setting, it's not like your PCP or going for your annual physical or like an orthopedic surgeon or it's a very, very intimate setting. And so building a really trusting, comfortable, intimate relationship with your medical care provider is really important. And I was just really good at that, it turns out. And so I started working at the clinic, just regular, on the floor, seeing patients after their morning monitoring. So they would have their scans and their blood work, and we would see them, calling them with their results and instructions. But then it kind of turned into I started doing at-home injections for patients, and then started doing I realized a lot of like counseling and consulting outside of my work hours. And one of my very first patients who I was doing injections for was like, "You should really start your own business." She was like, "I really couldn't have done this without you. You really like everyone needs a Layla. You need to do this." But I didn't really have it's not my wheelhouse. I'm such a clinical person. I had no idea where to start. So I finally, she kept nagging me, and I'm so grateful that she did, but she finally like pushed me to do it, and I looked into it, and I started my own concierge nursing services and consulting business where we would do everything from the hands-on stuff like coming to your house and doing your injections for you, but also a lot of hand holding. So we kind of just hold your hand and guide you through the process. So it's like having a medical guide. I know there's a lot of like fertility coaches and things like that out there. I think it's beautiful that patients are kind of like switching lanes and trying to pay it forward through their own experiences. I think the difference is that as a medical professional trained in fertility nursing, it just gives it another layer of you have like the warmth of having a friend, but you also have medical, like credible
Yeah, like
guidance
you're
at the same
giving the
time.
right, yeah, like you're giving the right instructions. And I know for me, when I went through IVF, the very first question that happened was we get this huge box of meds at our house, and I'm like, who's done IVF before? I don't know how to mix this. I don't know where I'm supposed to shoot this, like in my body. So that
Right.
is such a benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of, how it started. And so I was working on that. I didn't really know how to scale it. I was kind of working, in the New York, New Jersey area. One of my very first patients was an early advisor to Jake, who had been working on Dandy already for about a year. And he sent me the deck. He was like, I think you'd be perfect for this. So he introduced us, one of my former patients introduced us. And we figured, I'm doing all of these virtual care services. We have these products. Why don't we just build it into one big holistic fertility brand? And then eventually we realized we should really scale the at-home injections too, because everywhere in the country, people need this. It's not just in this area. And so that's like our most recent thing, is that we launched the at-home injections, to scale. And yeah, that's kind of the evolution. I've also been a fertility patient myself. I naively never thought that I would be. I had two uneventful, knock on wood, healthy pregnancies and babies with my first two tries. And from there, we tried to have a third, and it just kind of blew up in my face. And so, yeah, I've been through all of the procedures, multiple late miscarriages, DNCs, a DNE. I've done two egg retrievals, four embryo transfers. So now I kind of have it from both
Both
sides, both
ways.
perspectives. So,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well,
yeah,
thank you for sharing that. And I'm so sorry for your losses. I can
thank you.
definitely relate, and I know our listeners can. So much to unpack there. So first, I want to give Jake a little call out. What is his, can you speak for him a little bit? So he's
Yeah,
your co-founder, and so
yep,
it's you and him that started D&D. What is his
yep.
background? Does his family have experience with infertility, or this is
So he doesn't, his personal, like him and his wife have not. He actually just had a second daughter. We both have two girls.
that's awesome.
So yeah, so he's a girl dad. He was living with a family member during COVID that was going through fertility treatment. So that was his exposure into the space. He doesn't have a clinical background at all. He works in the hospitality space, just, building really carefully curated experiences. And so that's what he brought into Dandy. But he was living with a family member during COVID and kind of witnessed her, really tough struggle with it. And that's kind of how the ideas started coming together.
How powerful, like how powerful of an experience to kind of see that for your family member and say, I have to fix this.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because Jake is like, he reached out to us, oh my gosh, like probably 2 years ago at this point. I mean, it was like the very beginning, and he is so passionate about the product and the services. And to have found you is such an amazing match. I think like your
Hmm.
clinical background and everything you just shared, I'm learning a little bit of your background as well, and how powerful. So that's incredible. I was going to ask you kind of your personal journey. So, at what point in your background that you just shared, you had switched over to working in the fertility clinics. You're starting to learn a little bit more about not really necessarily your own fertility, but fertility in general and like the
Hmm.
menstrual cycle and all of that. At what point did you guys start trying to have your third? Was it kind of after you were pretty set up in that space?
So it's just so, again, so naive. So I guess not naive. Now looking back, I think it was naive to think that I wouldn't hit any obstacles. But we had two kids. My first one took us a little over a year, which, as much as people hate to hear it, at the age that I was, 32, 33, that's very average.
Yeah.
It taking 12 months or more is average. There's nothing wrong with you. But it took us a little over a year. And then my second one, in between, we were like, oh, well, it took us this long and we don't know how many kids we want or what's going to happen. So we should just freeze embryos in between.
Wow.
And then I got pregnant the month after we froze embryos with my second, again, completely uneventful, normal pregnancy. And from there we were like, okay, my husband was like, we're done. Like we're good. Like he's like, I'll just have a vasectomy. And we decided for him to have a vasectomy because we figured even if we change our minds, we have all of these normal embryos that we can use.
Right.
Why not? And all of the doctors were like, yeah, of course, like that's a sound decision. You've
Yeah.
had two normal pregnancies and you have all these normal embryos. So we had my husband have a vasectomy and we thought everything was fine. Of course, we changed our minds. We wanted to try for a third. And we started to use my embryos and I got pregnant first try, no problem. And I'm like, oh, this is like a walk in the park. We went in for my 12-month visit and there was no heartbeat. And um I like think back on it now as a nurse, like normally I would have picked up on this, but I was just like in La La Land, we were talking about baby names and um I didn't expect anything to go wrong because nothing there were no
Right.
indicators that it would, and it was a tested embryo. So I should have known when I went in for the scan when the ultrasound tech was being
Like
really quiet,
silent.
like the things that
Yeah.
you pick up that now looking back, I'm like, oh, she did all of that. She's being really quiet, and then she said, "I'm gonna go get the doctor." And it still didn't dawn on me. And then the doctor came in and she just like kept going and going and there was nothing. And then as soon as she said, "I'm sorry," I lost it. Like I um never thought that I would react that way. Still, this is like 2 years ago, and I still when I think about it, it just kills me. Um but yeah, so that was my first loss, and it was a normal embryo. Of course, we tested the fetal products after I had the DNC, completely normal, no signs of anything. I had another hysteroscopy. My dear friend Lee is a gynecological surgeon. She's amazing. She's done all of my hysteroscopies. And so every time, she goes in and she looks at everything and everything is normal. And of course, we started digging and seeing every specialist, seeing an MFM, anyone you can think of. I went to for second opinions. And then they were like, okay, well, sometimes it just doesn't work and we don't know why. Same thing that I used to say to my patients, even
Right.
though it's a tested embryo, there's still we don't know. There's gray. So then we did another transfer. It was a biochemical pregnancy. I knew it was going to be because when they give you the photo of the embryo, I was like, "Ooh, this is an ugly embryo." Like I don't think it's going to work out.
See, that's like such the con of being so educated in the space. Like you kind of know before you
You
should.
know too much.
Yeah, I have that too because I work in OBGYN and MFM and it's like I just know way more than I really should to so you were kind of like I know this isn't going to be great.
Yeah, and so it ended up being a biochemical pregnancy, and that means from the embryo implants, but it doesn't continue to grow. And then we did another transfer, and the embryo actually split. So I was pregnant with twins, and everything was going. There was no indicators. Like sometimes one twin is starting to crop out, like they have different heartbeats, they have different rates of growth, and so like you have all these like little indicators, but they were both growing perfectly fine. They both had the same heartbeats. And same thing, I went in at 11 weeks this time and no heartbeats on either of them. Um,
I mean,
so
that's
then yeah, that's when we
pregnant. That's
started.
a really long time to be pregnant. Like,
Well, yeah, well then the third time, which and the MFM basically said to me it would be a statistical anomaly if this happened to you a third time, and the third time it happened at 16 weeks. So,
I'm
yeah.
so sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I fall into and I try to tell patients to not look at my story as like I'm the abnormal. So
Right.
I'm like this tiny little percent of the population. I think it's like 1 to 2% of people fall into this bucket. And so I'm not the norm. So I don't want people to be scared of my story because it really is a really tiny portion of the population that this happens to so many times and so late in pregnancy with no
Right.
answers.
Right. I feel like you're
Um,
the 1% of the 1% because I can resonate to that too. It's like I've had 8 losses. That's not normal. That's not going to happen to
no.
you. And as both of us are advocates in this space, I love that you said that. It's like, yes, this is my story, but don't use it as an example because it's probably not gonna, you're not gonna have 5 miscarriages in a row. That's super rare. But to your
Right.
point, I mean, reoccurrent loss, so 3+ is 1%. But then for years to go even deeper of being those later losses, like 12+ weeks is really rare.
Yeah. So it's just something that I never obviously anticipated happening. And it did, and it really, really broke me. Um And you would think, and people try to say all of the, anecdotal
Right
things, and
things. Yes.
they end up saying the wrong things. And I don't blame them, because I probably didn't say all the right things even as a practitioner when my patients were going through losses. So I get it. But, people are like, oh, like, count your blessings. Like, you have two healthy children. And we used to do that at work. We used to have patients that came in and they have a second, they have two or three and they want one more. And we're like, okay, but like, it's not working out. So just let it go. And you just can't understand it until you're in it. That's really all I can say, is that you can't understand it until you're in it, sadly.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, so here we are. I'm still learning. I'm still, yesterday I went to get my eyebrows done, and the girl who does my eyebrows, she's a little bit younger than me. I'm turning 39, and she just had her uterus removed. So not a full hysterectomy, but partial, for really bad endometriosis. She was in a lot of pain all the time. So she had that done, and she was telling me about, she starts bringing up adenomyosis and all these things, and that the surgeon that she saw has suggested this. And then, of course, I'm like, oh, like a light bulb goes off in my head, and I'm like, oh, should I go and see this person and ask them about this? Like, is that why I had? So I'm still
Yeah.
kind of like grasping for answers. So
Which
I
is
don't know if my journey is done yet, but
Yeah, which I think
yeah,
I think you just sharing that as an expert in the space is just really like again powerful for listeners of like nobody knows it all. Nobody's going to have these answers. I mean, it is so specific to your own journey and you're again going to have to advocate for yourself even if you are a fertility nurse and have a
that's
fertility
it.
company. Like it's this conception phase and what I've learned through my journey is like it's really under researched. I mean, for good reasons. I mean, you're not going to be able to do test studies on pregnant women. It's just it to risk
Yeah.
the baby and the fetus. So it makes sense. But at the same time, like I just love that you were so vulnerable and shared your story and just shared that like even you, somebody that's like the top of the field, you still don't have all the answers. And so not to really feel guilty.
And I may never, by the way. I may
Right.
never have. And even like Lee, she's my friend, and my doctor, I've worked with her for so long. She's my friend, and they still, I'll never forget, Lee said this to me. She said, even I, including myself, no one is going to tell you whether or not to keep trying, and that it's going to happen or it's not going to happen. No one can definitively tell you that. No one's going to tell you that, no matter how much you dig. So ultimately, it's up to you to decide, like, when you feel comfortable stopping.
Yes, I love that. And it's so important that you make that own decision because you're gonna have to live with that, right? Like, okay, I made the
Hmm.
stop and I'm good and we're moving on to a new chapter, or hey, I'm gonna keep digging into this. No, I totally agree. So really, I know you shared with Jake, like Jake had reached out to you, said you're a perfect fit. What, when you guys were starting Dandy, so again, the listeners know you have all of this personal professional experience. When you were starting Dandy, what were like some of the top, I guess, challenges that you guys saw in the fertility community that you were like, let's create a solution to?
The injections are always first and foremost, whether it's the needles themselves, like if somebody has a phobia of needles, the mixing of the medications, making sure that you're mixing them correctly, using the right needles and syringes for each thing. Everybody has their own specific pain point, but overall, the injections seem to be the biggest pain point that we hear about from our patients. So even if you're not afraid of needles or you're not afraid of injecting yourself, you want to make sure that you're mixing it correctly.
Yeah,
So
because
the injections.
it's so expensive. That was my thing. I think it was Omnitrope. I'm like, this is like $10,000 and I don't know like what if I overmix it or undermix it and then you're on that timeline. So having that injectable consultation type service, it just I feel like takes an added layer of anxiety out of like wasting money or just doing it wrong.
Yep, exactly. So whatever the specific part of the injections is that is your unique anxiety, the injections overall seem to be the biggest pain point. And so that's where the products came in. And it's just this hands-free belt system. It's a wearable belt system, and the hands-free piece, kind of like having a hands-free breast pump. That part was huge too. Like the heating pad, especially like when I did my progesterone injections, the things that I would tell my patients to do, I wasn't doing because I was like, I don't have time to be plugged into the wall for 20 minutes to heat after my progesterone injection and then sit and roll it out. I don't have time for that. Whereas the hands-free heating pad, not only can you use it for post retrieval, or you can even use it when you're not cycling and use it for your period cramps. Like that's a whole nother use for it. But when I was doing my progesterone injections, if I had something like that where I could just put it in and walk around and get everything else done and then massage it out, that would have been really helpful because the heating pad alone, a lot of patients don't do it. That's why they end up getting so sore from their progesterone injections, is because they don't want to take the 20
Yeah.
minutes to be plugged into the wall.
I love that. And another thing, like the before part too, I remember I was too nervous to do my injection, so I made my husband do it. Well, he had to leave early for work. So I would get up at like 4:30 and hold that progesterone vial in my hand like this to try to warm it
Mhm.
up. And I see
Mhm.
like with Dandy, there's even the spot that you can kind of put the vial in to warm it up, right? With
Mhm.
the
Yep.
heating pad. That's awesome. And like we could be doing
Mhm.
this podcast right now and you could have the belt on and no idea.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's hands-free and it's multi-purpose. Like I said, you could use it even when you're not cycling. And so the products are beautiful in that regard, taking care of that piece of the pain point of injections. And then the other piece is the virtual services. So I was used to doing all of the hand holding and consulting. And even virtual services, people are like, well, how are you going to help me do my injections if you're not physically here with me? And you'd be surprised. Like after doing a virtual visit, patients are always like, wow, that was so helpful. Even just having you talk me through how to mix it was so helpful. So
Yeah.
in all of the areas where we don't have at-home nurses, you can schedule a virtual session with a nurse. All of our nurses are fertility trained nurses. They're not nurses that we've trained in fertility. They're nurses that are either still working in clinic and doing this in addition to, or that have had extensive fertility clinic experience and are now only doing this. And so they can answer all questions about all the medications. And so we do a lot of that. We also do a lot of pre counseling, which I think is so important, and people don't know that this exists. So spread the word because I think the pre counseling is so important. Even before you go to a fertility clinic, we can give
Yes.
you advice on what to expect at your first visit. A lot of our patients are really taken aback when they have to do a transvaginal ultrasound where they stick a wand up your vagina. And our same-sex female patients, especially our virginal patients, like that's a lot. And
Yeah.
so knowing what to anticipate, what kind of blood work they're going to do, what kind of test results maybe you already have that you can bring with you into the visit, what kind of questions you should be asking. So we do a lot of pre-counseling as well. And
That's
then even if you,
amazing. I didn't even know that. So that's like
yeah,
that's amazing. And that is such an added benefit. I mean, I feel like just because I've gone through it and people know my story, they're always DMing me like, what should I ask during my first visit? Or like for me, the most overwhelming part for IVF was getting that box delivered on my door. I mean, I just broke down and started crying because
yes,
they're like,
well, we do that. We do an unboxing.
do you
You
really?
can schedule. Yeah, so let's say that you know that your shipment is coming tomorrow night. You can schedule for a nurse to be there with you to unbox your medications, and we'll walk you through everything you pull out. We'll say, this is what this is used for. These are the needles and syringes that go with that. This one's your trigger shot, so you can put it on the side. This one needs to be refrigerated. We do medication unboxings. We really do A to Z. We do pre-counseling, we do during your cycle. You can tap into a nurse anytime you get a test result that you're not sure of. Instead of Googling it and playing phone tag with your nurse,
That's awesome.
you can just tap into us and we'll break down the test results for you. We really do it all.
Okay, so okay, wait, this is so neat. I didn't know that. That's really neat about the unboxing and even the test results. I mean, I have friends all the time send me screenshots and I'm not clinical, so I am so hesitant to respond to them because I'm like, I don't know everything. Like I didn't have a thyroid disorder, so I don't want to speak to that for you. But now that I can kind of maybe now I'll just redirect them to Dandy. So let's kind of get there. How can they find you? How can they book these types of things? You guys have a phenomenal social media presence, but you also have a really good website that really shows the product and all of your services. How can listeners find you?
Yeah, so you can find us on the website itself, dandyfertility.com. You can find us on Instagram, Dandy Fertility. We are on TikTok. TikTok is so funny to me because it's so past my generation.
Mine too.
I feel so old saying that. But you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, our website, dandyfertility.com. Our kits are sold on our website as well. So if you wanted to purchase a kit, you can bundle it with a virtual session. All of our services, including the at-home injections, can be found on the website itself. And if you click on, let's say, is a geographical location for at-home visits that we don't currently have nurses for yet, then you can that we have a discount code that you can do for a virtual visit instead. But all of that can be found on dandyfertility.com.
That's amazing. And as we've said Dandy Fertility 200 times, I forgot to like get the backstory on it. It's like a dandelion, right?
Yeah, so it took us a really long time to come up with the name. We've been so meticulous about every single thing that we've done, from the colors that we've chosen for the products to the name. We had a lot of contenders, and we kept like putting feelers out there for all of our, patients that were helping us with our R&D along the way. And the dandelion flower has a lot of connections to fertility, and we also thought that, the dandelion goes through all of these different growth stages and what it looks like and what it blooms into. And it all kind of just came together, and we just thought that dandy was like the cutesy version of dandelion. So that's how we came up with the name.
It is, and it's so clear how meticulous and how great both you and Jake are, and how passionate you are with the product. It's like the most aesthetically pleasing product, and it's like it's nice too. Like I used it, so I used it just for my Lovenox injections, and oh my gosh, it was
Yeah.
great. I used the ice pack. It's one of the best ice. It's like the coldest ice pack I have ever used, and then
Hmm.
the shot, and you have the little massager and everything, and it's like really quality products. You can just tell. I mean, I've known Jake now for a while, and I've been getting to know you as well, but I just can't say enough about how incredible both of you are, and the product, and all the services that you guys offer. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Is there anything from your own experience, either professionally or personally, that you kind of want to share with listeners that are maybe just now starting to say, like, I'm going to probably have to walk into that infertility clinic?
I think the pre-counseling is the most important. It's never too late to reach out to us to help you through your cycle. You could have done 5 IVF cycles already, and you need help. I think that the pre-counseling is so important though, and I think that prepping yourself before you go into the frenzy is so, so, so important, and understanding everything before you start is so, so important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We will have all of the links tagged in the show notes. We will link the social medias, the website, and then also some of the discounts, because I know you guys have been so great to work with us. So we have a little discount as well that we'll put down in the show notes. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.